I met Justice Sotomayor in 2008. So I was interviewed by her for a clerkship in May of 2008 at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York City. She was warm and tough and brilliant, and that radiated even then. And I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to potentially clerk for her. She offered me a clerkship on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. She then was elevated, though, to the United States Supreme Court before I was able to spend a year with her. And eventually, she actually asked me to come to DC to clerk for her at the United States Supreme Court. And that was a wonderful experience. And that's when I got to actually know her much better. Justice Sotomayor grew up in New York. She grew up in the Bronx in public housing. And she was raised by her parents, but also she had relatives, aunts, and so forth who were nearby and who were really instrumental in shaping her as a young person. I mean, her life kind of took a big turn when she was accepted into Princeton University. As a result, got to go to Yale Law School, the top law school in the country. But she initially went into public service as a prosecutor, especially her mother, Sonia Sotomayor, had a tremendous impact on her and on her desire to further her education. So her mother was a nurse. Her father actually passed away when she was around 7. I think one important mentor, in addition to her parents, one important mentor was when she got to college, a professor who kind of saw her talent, her potential very early on, and kind of helped her navigate the world that was Princeton. And so she, in her book, she credits one particular professor as being extraordinarily supportive and helping her and helping guide her. You know, she's faced a lot of challenges, really in multiple ways, right? Actually, one way, in some ways, even I won't say necessarily more than her ethnicity, but something that kind of defines the day-to-day experience is that she has diabetes. Right? As a child, she was diagnosed with diabetes, and I think part of how she ended up accomplishing so much in such little time is that she, I think, imagined herself as a person who was in a hurry because she didn't know how much time she had. Fortunately, with advances in medicine and the like, things worked out wonderfully, right? But that's how it's part of it helps explain, I think, her perseverance, her tenacity, and how she accomplished so much, or why she accomplished so much so quickly, in addition to her brilliance. The combination of being Puerto Rican and growing up in a public housing project meant that the experience of going to Princeton, she describes this in her book, the experience of going to Princeton did feel very alien to her. Like either she felt like an alien or the place felt like it was an alien place because lots of folks had grown up with wealth. There were very few people there who looked like her, but also very few people who had grown up in the sort of economic circumstances that she'd grown up. It's really kind of remarkable when you think about it that despite being in a place and in a situation that felt so different, where she was around people who'd gone to the elite prep schools and the like, for her to graduate first in her class is really remarkable and a testament to her brilliance. She is the most brilliant person I have ever met. So just in terms of her already in her time on the court, there have been areas where she's had, I think, a really important impact. Most notably, the Fourth Amendment is probably so far where she's had kind of the biggest direct impact on a doctrine, where you can look at an opinion that she wrote, an opinion that we call a concurrence. So it's an opinion where she was writing for herself and saying, I agree with the majority, but here are some other principles to think about. So she did that once in a case called Jones, a Fourth Amendment case. And then later, years later, the Supreme Court had the question whether or not an officer would need a warrant to search someone's cell phone after they've arrested them. And the court concluded that they did, and they explained how our telephones these days, they have all kinds of information about us, from photographs to emails to where we've been because of GPS. And they cited to her concurrence. The Chief Justice cited directly to her concurrence in Jones for that proposition. So it's a space where She put out an idea, and it gained a lot of acceptance in the legal academy. Lots of folks were writing about this idea, and it made its way into the actual law. She has a considerable sense of fairness. I think she is guided, and her Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, I think, fits into a broader rubric of procedural fairness. So she wants to make sure everyone has a fair shot, or gets their day in court, so to speak, or gets a lawyer, right? So the process to her is more important than the outcome. And I think ultimately that will become, already actually the Yale Law Journal did an online symposium on her work. And a professor named Tom Tyler, who's one of the most respected professors in this field of procedural fairness, wrote an article noting that was a space where she's had already kind of had an impact, and already clearly guides the way that she thinks about the law. In addition to sort of that kind of legal impact, she also, I think, has the impact of being just kind of an inspiration. As someone who grew up in modest circumstances, and as someone who grew up disabled, she inspires people who also didn't grow up with a lot of means, or people of color, or people who are disabled. And I think it's clear from what she does on a day-to-day basis that she takes that responsibility very seriously, in addition to the mark that she is making on the law, right? She wants to be a great justice. She also wants to be a role model, especially for kids. One thing that's remarkable about Justice Sotomayor is how, when people meet her, I think that they're surprised at how down to earth she is. There's something kind of inspiring just about that too, that she doesn't put on airs. She is still, the same person who grew up in the Bronx. I think he chose her for a few reasons. I think one reason he chose her is that she was the most experienced person her age in the judiciary. There was no one who had been a federal judge longer, and who was her age, and because she was appointed when she was in her early 30s. In addition to that, she was also, she had so much experience beyond the judiciary. So somehow she managed to be the most experienced judge her age, while also having been a partner at a law firm. She knew what it meant to represent clients, including corporate clients, including in trademark cases and the like, right? So that kind of also was, I think, appealing and interesting. And she'd been a prosecutor, a line prosecutor. So she, that is, and a line prosecutor is someone who, that means they're on the front lines, right? They're in the courtroom. They're making the arguments to the juries and the judges and the like. She did that, so she knew the state criminal justice system, and she knew what it was like to be a prosecutor. So I think when you put that all together, that sort of made it a no-brainer. And then, in addition to the fact she was the most experienced, there are not that many people who graduate first in their class at Princeton, right? So in addition to being the most experienced, she was also obviously extraordinarily brilliant and hardworking. So I think those are the primary reasons why he picked her. Sure. So A, work hard. B, ask questions. Be curious. Be a little precocious. Be willing to kind of, especially in the age of the internet, to go online and, find somebody who does something you might be interested in. And if they're in your town, to ask about an internship, or if they're not in your town, to ask them, can you schedule a call to ask them what it's like to do the job that they're doing. Expose yourself to the people who are doing the things that you think you might want to do. And that can be a source of inspiration, that can be a source of contacts, and it can just be a way more generally to broaden one's understanding of what's available in the world. What motivates her, I think, the most is not being the first, but being the last. And that is being the last, one of the last 9 people, or one of the very few last people to hear a case. And that there's nobody after that. There's nobody who's going to review the Supreme Court's decisions and say, actually, you're reversed, or actually, you got this right, or actually, you got this wrong, or actually, here are the colossally terrible consequences of what you did, and therefore, we're going to reverse you. There's no one to do that, right? I think that's what motivates her, is that you got to get it right. And so in order to get it right, you have to work really hard, and you have to pay attention, and you have to be thoughtful, and you have to be willing to ask questions, and you have to be willing to to research, and you have to be willing to also draw some on your common sense and wisdom. Yeah, I think she's motivated not by being first, but by being last.